Welcome, everyone, to Soñamos Podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to us today. We are here in the space to be able to tell the many wonderful stories of our immigrant community members. Today, we have a very special guest, and I'm so happy to have her here, Sandra Diaz. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Jael.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here and taking the time. To get started, please tell us a little bit about you and the work that you do.
So currently, I am working as a narrative specialist for a national network of migrant-led Latino and Caribbean organizations, and all based in the U.S., and we're called Alianza Americas. And my work as a narrative specialist is basically to help these organizations do storytelling and narrative change work.
Wow, that's amazing. Why is that work so important to you?
I think it's important to me because of my own experience and my own story. So I am a Mexican immigrant, queer person, and DACA recipient currently, living undocumented in the United States for now 22 years. So everything I've had to live through in those years, I think have led me to this kind of work. And I think it's a passion to tell the stories that our community have to tell. And getting them to be the ones to say it themselves, I think is very powerful. I've noticed how powerful it has been in my own life as well.
Tell us a bit more about your family and your background because, they're the ones who shape who you are and the things that you do now.
Yeah, so my family is originally from San Luis Potosí, Mexico. We are from a small ranchito there. We are from this area that is called La Huasteca Potosina. So I think it's known for its cascadas, the waterfalls and lakes, and I think caves as well.
I've heard it's very beautiful there.
I've heard of stories from my family just finding themselves in a cave at some point. And both sides of my family are from that same area, and I think both were dedicated to agriculture while they were there. On my dad's side, they had sugarcane fields, and on my mom's side, they grew these crops that I believe it comes from indigenous practices of like la milpa, which is, if I'm not mistaken, it's corn, squash, and beans.
Oh, wow.
So they kind of take turns growing these crops, which they're supposed to complement each other and keep the land fertile. So that's a little bit of the background of where I come from.
Wow, that sounds beautiful. And what was your family's purpose to come to the United States?
There are a couple, I think, that culminated at the end of the day, but it has come to kind of me just realizing it as I'm an adult now, trying to find those answers. I think when I ask my parents, usually they just say for a better life or to give you educational opportunities that you wouldn't have in Mexico. I mean, we were like an hour drive away from the closest grocery store, so we were very remote. And as an adult, as I've been kind of learning history and been able to kind of give name to some of the circumstances in which people migrate, I remember there's this very specific moment where I was having coffee with my parents and my grandparents, and I started talking about the Bracero program. And my grandpa, who wasn't paying too much attention, his ears kind of perked up, and he said, "Oh, I think your great-grandpa was a part of that program, and they tried to take me too."
Right.
So he started telling me about that experience and what happened to the men of that era that all kind of came north, and then abruptly the program ended and left them, returned. Everyone returned, and they were supposed to be compensated, and there was never a real compensation. But I think that was a shock to me because I had known about this program for a long time already. And finding out that it was part of our family history was kind of a shock. So it made me realize that my family can tell me the pains and the hardships, like how it felt and the reasons why they felt like they needed to migrate for survival. But they couldn't really tell me what caused those pains.
Right.
And I think now as an adult, as I've been doing more research, I've been able to give name to some of those pains.
Well, that's interesting that you mentioned that program because there's so many families that have similar experiences, immigrant families, where, policy really is what affected them, right? During that program, what a lot of people don't know when it comes to the Bracero program, it's, really the U.S. undercutting the crops that they were being produced selling at a level that migrant workers in Mexico could never compete with. And now forcing them to go work for them, who are basically taking their job, right?
Yeah.
And so because your family's from such a remote area, depending on the land to really survive, I guess, that's what pushed them. But yeah, they can't put it into words, but it's interesting now that you understand what that actually meant.
And another thing that came up just because the Bracero conversation happened a few months ago, just a few weeks ago, I learned about the economic crash in 94. And then I started questioning. That's around the time that people in my family and in that whole region started like officially migrating. But the economic crash in Mexico, that's when the peso devalued, se devaluó el peso.
Right.
And it was also impacted, like that also was caused by U.S. policy. But that was also like another moment of like realization that life in Mexico was just not viable.
Right. And what was your family's dream for you, for your sister, when you first came to the United States?
I think the dream initially was to return. I think initially the plan, if you could call it a plan, was to come to the U.S. for a few years and make money and then build a house in Mexico in the land that they call home, because that's what they know. That's where they have all their roots. And we even started sending money back to Mexico for the first few years that we were in the U.S. to build a house over there. But I think slowly but surely we realized that returning to Mexico was not an option because we left for a reason. There were no opportunities, more specifically economic, but then thinking about the children, my sister and I, also educational, there were no opportunities. If we wanted to get an education, we'd have to go to a different town as like teenagers on our own, children on our own. And so I think eventually the dream had to change a little bit and focus more on giving my sisters and I just more opportunities and stability and we had already started building those roots in the U.S. And I think today as adults, like we're all with our respective partners and building families of our own. So we've
settling
built
into this country, contributing. And talking about all the amazing contributions, one fun fact I want to share that I don't think a lot of people know about you is that you're actually one of the founders of this wonderful organization, the Center for Immigrant Progress. Tell us a little bit more about, that vision when you first decided, along with the other founding members, that this was something that was important to your community.
Yeah, so this happened during the first Trump administration. I think at that time we were all first-generation students or undocumented students ourselves, and going into adulthood and into work life now. And I think we realized we were heavily impacted by the administration. I mean, one thing that happened during that time, personally, was DACA was being rescinded for the first time in the courts. So that was like an additional fear that now I had to face, something that my parents lived with always. But I think it was becoming real for me too. And that's a reality that a lot of us who created the organization kind of had to go through. And we just realized that we needed more support and guidance as young adults, young professionals, and we had a desire to do more for our community. And I think we couldn't find a specific space where those needs were met yet. We were in our own respective organizations, but they were more focused in children or in just families, but not like this group of like young people adults trying to find a way to give back.
And young adults trying to navigate, the situation that your families find themselves in, right? And I think all the fears that you had from the first Trump administration definitely became real during the second term. So it was so important that, you had that vision of what could happen and also what needed to be done to prepare for that. And so I think that's one of the most amazing things about CIP, that, it was founded by people who were directly impacted, who wanted to do something to help. And all women, all...
women of color.
Yes.
Migrant or first generation, or children of migrants.
And that's what makes it so impactful, right? Because we know our struggles, and so we know how to support our own community. And so tell me a little bit more about how, the creation of this organization ended up supporting a difficult time in your family.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we heard of a potential Trump 2.0, this was maybe already 2 years ago, so like 2024, during campaign season, we were like, let's not risk assuming that it's not going to happen, and let's prepare. So we saw a need to kind of shift gears in the organization, because while there are organizations in the area providing direct services already, we just knew it was going to be an uptick in need, and we needed to meet that need. And so we didn't, forget the original promise of the organization of trying to give guidance and build leadership with young people. We just added another layer of direct services to all these families who were going to need those services, and it ended up benefiting myself a few years down the line. I ended up using those services.
Yeah, I mean, definitely there's always been a need. After the second Trump administration, we definitely saw an uptake in the detentions. But like you mentioned, this isn't anything new. I think our communities have lived through so much enforcement in the past, but now it definitely ramped up the amount of detentions that were actually occurring in our community. And so can you take us back to the moment when we saw like the height of the enforcement?
Yeah. So I think it was last year. It started in Chicago, and I think that's where the focus went most of the time. But slowly it started kind of like going into the suburbs, which is where my family lives. They live here in Lake County. And specifically in October, there was this one Friday where it just felt like they were everywhere. I mean, we were staying in contact, checking orgs on social media, and just staying in the know of like where they could be spotted and all of that. But that day just felt like they were everywhere. And it was actually like 7, 8 a.m. when my dad and my uncle were both unlawfully detained by ICE while they were working. They work in landscaping, and they were in private property. They were getting all their equipment down to do the work that they do in this house, and they like out of nowhere were just surrounded by a group of agents, and they questioned everyone about their citizenship status except the one person who didn't have an accent. So obviously they were
being
profiled.
Right. And that's definitely what we were seeing, that they were, how they were operating around that time.
Yeah. No warrant.
No warrant. Right. And what was that moment like for you when you first found out that they had been detained?
I think it was a shock initially. I just couldn't believe it was happening, I think. So it took me a moment to just come to terms with, I need to take action.
Yeah.
I think it was a moment of just being like, is this a dream right now? Because I know it's been happening. I know of many other families across the country where this is going on. But now it's like directly affecting my family, which was a fear. So definitely an initial shock. And as I was calling my family just to see how everyone was doing, like, is this real? Is this really happening? I noticed that everyone was kind of like just emotionally not okay.
Yeah.
It felt like they were crumbling and they were frozen. And I was frozen too. But I think that was my wake-up call of like, okay, I've been doing this kind of work with immigrant families and just being in the know of immigration policy.
Right.
Maybe I'm the most equipped to do this. So I kind of took charge and immediately started looking for who can help me. And you obviously came to mind, and CIP came to mind. And that's the first call I made after talking to my family.
Yeah, and I remember that day when that call came in. It was very difficult just because, we have a close relationship. And, I mean, we had been seeing many, many families go through that. But it's never doesn't get easier just because it happens to someone, that is even closer. It's even harder because you have to take your emotions aside and still function and be there to support. And so, I can definitely relate to that feeling that you had where it's like, I want to collapse, but I can't because I have to take charge. And I think it was so important to know that, your family had done everything right. We had started working with them here at CIP to prepare for worst case scenario. Of course, never thinking that, they would be targeted because, like you said, there was no warrant for your family members. Your father and your uncle never had any issues. They weren't criminals. And so it's just, didn't fit the narrative, right? But we were seeing that people were just targeted for how they looked. And so even though they started doing everything right, it's still impacting them.
Yeah, and I mean, they've been here for decades.
Yeah.
They've been here for so long. And I think something that was also really painful to witness was with my uncle. He has young children,
Yeah.
like 10 years old, 15 years old, 16, 17 years old, the oldest. And it was a reminder of like how growing up I had that fear.
Yeah.
It was like an ongoing childhood fear of like,
Right.
maybe today my dad might not come home.
Yeah.
He might not come home from work. And realizing, I mean, as an adult, I feel like I am more equipped to deal with this situation. But just thinking of my little cousins who
Right.
are living that reality that I was so fearful of
Yeah.
as a child.
I definitely relate to that. I think growing up, I always knew I was, undocumented growing up. And I knew that there was always a risk because, again, this is not anything new. Detentions have been happening for a long time. Not to this scale, but it was really my childhood nightmare. And knowing that other kids are going through what I feared was very hard for me as well. And I think most of us who grew up in this situation, we can relate to that. Not to minimize what you went through because, even as an adult, it's something very hard. But yeah, definitely seeing kids go through all of that process, it's just hard.
And in a developmental stage, right?
Yes.
So it's going to impact them long term.
Yeah. And so, I mean, even though that whole situation was difficult, how were you able to manage that situation? By being prepared?
Yeah. Okay. So that's where CIP came in. And I think it was a moment where everything kind of came full circle, thinking of like, I think everything we did for CIP was like to help our community, and our family is the community.
Yes.
We are the community. So we did a Know Your Rights training. We had you come to our home, our family home. One of my cousins gave their home as an option to just have all of our family come in and have a Know Your Rights training in like a very safe space, very personal. And everyone brought their documents and their questions and just tried to prepare as best as we could. We even made appointments to do like
guardianship, power of attorney.
And I'm like, I know them in Spanish, but not in
Right.
English. But all these documents that if one of them were to be detained or deported, like who would take charge of all these other things that are just like kind of up in the air if you're not prepared.
Right.
And like I said, I mean, we build roots here. We have homes. We have like all these other things. We have a whole community that depends on us. My uncle has a business. Like there's so many unanswered questions when someone is just like disappeared from the community like that. So we connected with CIP to do that Know Your Rights training. And so we felt somewhat prepared.
Yeah.
It still happened. I think it was like a week to the date almost after that training that my dad and my uncle were detained, and immediately knew that we could call you, and you all connected us to a lawyer, not just an immigration lawyer, but I think because it was a warrantless arrest, we were connected to a federal lawyer, someone that could
do habeas.
Yeah.
I mean, the one good thing about the situation and being prepared was that they had legal evaluations before, where they knew that if they were to get detained, they would have some sort of relief. And so when I got that call, at least I knew, all right, they know not to say anything, not to say anything. That gave us a little bit of comfort, and now we just needed to move quickly because it happened on a Friday too.
On a Friday, yes.
Which made it more challenging. A lot of people don't know, you get detained, what they do is immediately move you to another state. And so we were able to connect you to a federal attorney who filed the immediate restraining order so they wouldn't take them out of the state, which made a huge difference.
If I remember correctly, we filed it because this happened on a Friday, we filed it Saturday morning, like 9 a.m., and by 11, we got a call that everyone else who was detained that day were moved to Texas.
Yeah.
And my dad and uncle were the only ones who remained in Illinois.
And that would have created a whole different world of challenges. And so, I mean, time is really of the essence. But again, it's that pre-work that your family did that really made a difference in their situation. And, that really, really helped manage it as much as possible, right? Because, I mean, it's traumatic enough. But at least, once you were out of that shock, knowing who to call, that's so important. I mean, so many of our community members don't even know
Yeah.
where their first call will be.
I can't even imagine how difficult, because it was challenging having, all of you all here as someone that I can lean on. It was still really challenging. So I can't imagine what it's like for someone who has not done that pre-work or who doesn't know who's the first call to get legal support. Like, I can't imagine how difficult that's going to be.
And, other than, working on the case and trying to figure out how to get your family out of detention, there's other things that your family was navigating too, because, we're talking about all these legal things, but can you take us back and talk about what your family actually experienced in the detention center?
So in detention, I'll share a little bit about the family outside who was kind of like living through this moment. I think we were all going through a lot of stress. I think we were dealing with, mostly me and my sister were dealing with like the paperwork and dealing with conversations with ICE, and sometimes not even knowing where my dad and my uncle were, like where they were located.
Just to know where they were actually being kept, right?
Yeah, and if they were okay. And then I think also my own family sometimes looking to me for answers, and sometimes I didn't have straight answers to give, or questioning why one case was moving faster than another.
Right.
They had different judges, like thinking that I had some control over the immigration system. So that was also, I think, very, on a personal level, very painful to have to go through. But there was also the fear of losing my dad, and not just losing him as in where is he located, but him passing away, because he's diabetic and in his 50s. And I think a lot of anger too. I think we were all going through a lot of anger at the time, because and I stressed this with my family. I was like, there's people and corporations profiting from all of this suffering, not just the suffering of people in detention, but ours too, right? Like every family function was just us kind of like, it would turn into us just grieving what's going on at the time.
And you make a good point, because that's one thing that a lot of people don't know, that these detention centers are for-profit centers. There's a lot of people making a lot of money, so of course they have an interest in making rules harsher and promoting more and more people being detained, even if they are not dangerous to our community. And so that's actually one of the things that we like to highlight, of how unjust it is that families are having to go through the situations that you and your family had to go through.
Yeah, and I think it was even more painful learning about the circumstances that they were in. So at first they were held in the Broadview facility, the processing center, which is not a detention center, it's a processing center. So people are not meant to be there for more than, I think, 12 hours, if I'm not mistaken. They were there for almost a week. And the conditions were, freezing temperatures, lights were on at all times. They were packed in a room where so tightly that they could not sit down. So they could not sleep either. No change of clothes. The bathrooms were clogged and open, visible for people to see when they went to the bathroom. So it was horrible and inhumane, and so much cruelty, and the agents were all very verbally abusive to them. And every time I spoke to my dad, he would just say, "Protect your mom, protect your sisters." Like, it was protect your Thea. Like, it was, we can't imagine women in our family coming into this space and seeing them kind of break down as they were saying that, as like these Mexican macho men who never cry.
Who are strong always.
It was impactful, I think, for us to learn about those conditions.
So they shared that the conditions were worse for women in these centers.
Yeah, they didn't specify it, and I think they don't like talking about it. But
I mean, it's such a traumatic incident. I'm sure, even though this has passed for them now, it's going to be something that's going to be very, very hard for them to continue to deal with. Yeah,
it has been.
And how has your family, held up with that now since, that happened? They were luckily able to be released.
Yes.
So that's great. What was that moment like?
Oh, man. I recorded it, so eventually I'll share. But it was beautiful. I think that's the one where I allowed myself to cry. Finally, I was like, okay,
it was over.
And it was beautiful to see everyone united and coming together. My uncle was released about a month after detention, and my dad 2 months after.
Okay.
I was like crying, like yelling everywhere, like trying to call people, like my representatives, everyone, like, hey, like I need help, like. But we made it happen, and he was. They were both released, and they made it home for the holidays, which I think was something that we were just dreading, having to go through that with them there, detained. But no, they made it home, and right now they just both have immigration cases that are ongoing. So we're still dealing with some of that, and the fear is still constant. I think the fear continues not just for them, but for the rest of the family. Most of the people in my family are mixed status families. Myself being DACA and learning about DACA people being detained and deported with valid work permits, valid DACA, I think it's added another layer of fear, but maybe also a little bit of fuel to continue doing this work.
Right. I mean, that's always hard that it's constantly looming over your head. Like you say, you're a mixed status family. I mean, many of our immigrant families are mixed status family, right? And the sad truth is it takes forever to get to the end of, if you even have a pathway to get that status. And not everyone gets it at the same time. And so even if you're a U.S. citizen, even if you've achieved the goal, and I can speak on that personally, for me, I always wanted to get to becoming a citizen because I knew that was the safest route. And I was lucky enough to have a pathway eventually. But it still affects me. It doesn't change because I still have other family members who don't have the perfect status right now. And under this administration, if you don't have status right now, even if it's pending, even if it's, in a process, they can still detain you. And, the rules are constantly changing. They're making the rules harder. And so navigating all of this, it's not just impacting certain kind of people. It really impacts all of us.
A whole community. And I would argue, too, that citizenship alone is not the end goal. Like, even once you become a citizen, like, there's still other aspects of life and of social issues that affect us, like just having access to healthcare, having a dignified home. Like, all these things affect people who are not immigrants or are not undocumented. So, like I said, these kinds of issues affect immigrants too. Citizenship doesn't just automatically fix all those other systemic issues.
Right. It's just an added layer of, things that we have to, deal with and challenges that we have to overcome. 100%. And so what message would you share with community members out there that you want them to keep in mind?
I wish I had more time. But I think initially it's a reminder that there are many of us in this country that we are deserving of a dignified life of safety. I know it seems impossible sometimes with the current administration, and it feels impossible, but I do believe that enough people are waking up to that reality that it's unjust, it's unfair, and it doesn't have to be this way. So I do have hope that enough people will wake up and take action, because I don't think hope is enough. I think hope is a starting point, but we do need to follow that up with action. And I want to also add that we're brave. I mean, we made the journey from our countries of origin to here, coming like to a place that we don't know, like the language, the culture, or like the systems, and we made it work. We figured it out. So I think there's a moment to remember that that took a lot of bravery, and I'm very grateful to my parents for taking that journey. It wouldn't have given me the opportunities I have today or made me the person I am today. So regardless, I think all of that was not in vain. I think it was something I'm just very grateful for. And I mean, we have built communities here. We have families here. We have businesses here. Like we contribute so much to the culture, to the food, the spices, the music. Like we do so much, and have just we're so connected to this place we now call home. And I think we are deserving of to have a dignified life in the place we call home.
Right. Thank you so much. I mean, those words were amazing. I think that's definitely something that we need to always remember. And we really appreciate you opening up, and telling us your story. I know it's not easy, but so many people will connect with you just because so many of us are living through the same reality. And I just want to thank all of our listeners. Please continue to listen to our podcast. We're going to have many more amazing guests like Sandy to tell us their wonderful stories, and just share on social media, follow us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.